Hello, Power fans. This is Mathonical, joined for a deck tech and series on Oops All Instants. Due to popular demand, I've heard all of your requests. We're going to be running this through a league to see how much potential it actually has. It did get a top 8 at a Pauper MCQ, so it definitely has something going for it. So let's see if we can figure out some of its secrets. Starting off with the instance in this deck, we have Force Spike, 1 blue for counter target spell unless its controller pays 1. Not my favorite type of spell since it's going to fall off in the late game, but being able to counter something on the very first turn, early turns, or casting 2 spells in a turn early are kind of all necessary things that we want to be doing. So we're going to be playing it. We're not going to be afraid to side it out if the matchup allows it. It's also just really good to get your opponents with it once in a while. Next up, we got Counterspell, just 2 blue, counter target spell. Very self-explanatory, amazing card. Definitely running a full 4 of those. Following that, we got Exclude, 2 and a blue for counter target creature spell. Draw a card. Most decks in Pauper want to win with creatures at some point, and being able to counter them while drawing a card is just amazing. We've got Condescend, X and a blue, counter target spell unless its controller pays X, scry 2. We've only got 2 of those because it can be a bit clunky. It's also kind of falls off late game the same way Force Spike does, especially if our opponent ever gets a mana advantage. But being able to scry 2 is extremely useful, so we're going to be happy whenever we're able to counter something with that. Our card draw suite is Accumulated Knowledge, which is 1 and a blue. It draws a card, then draw cards equal to the number of cards named Accumulated Knowledge in all graveyards. The first one, unfortunately, only cycles, but when we get up to the third and fourth one, drawing 3 and 4 cards respectively, it is just amazing. A lot of value there. Think twice, 1 and a blue, draw a card. Not very exciting, but then we're going to be flashing it back for 2 and a blue. Both of those cards we're going to be able to cast whenever our opponent doesn't make us counter something or whenever we have spare mana. Just keep the card advantage going. And to round out our spells, we've got Repulse, which is 2 and a blue for turn target creature to its owner's hand. Draw a card. It may seem a little odd to be playing that, but once you start playing the deck, you'll realize that occasionally your opponent will get a creature down. It sucks, but it's true. So we definitely want to return it to their hand to try and counter it on the second time they play it. It's also very useful for some of our own creature synergies, just getting additional value out of them. So on that note, we're going to jump on over to them. We've got Spellstutter Sprite, 1 and a blue for a Fairy Wizard, 1/1, flash and flying. When Spellstutter Sprite enters the battlefield, counter target spell with converted mana cost X or less, where X is the number of fairies you control. You're going to see a bit of a fairy sub-theme we've got going on here, so we're quite often going to be able to counter whatever our opponents have. We do, of course, have to be careful that it doesn't get removed in response, so that way our number of fairies gets reduced, but we can quite often find places where we can 2-for-1 our opponent with this card. We're going to have 4 Pestermites, which is 2 and a blue, flash flying 2/1 to Fairy Rogue, and when it enters the battlefield, we may tap or untap target permanent. There's a lot of tricky stuff we can do with this, anywhere from tapping our opponent's blockers to reducing its own cost, and it's just a good solid 2-power flyer in the air. Trades with most other flyers, and is a relatively good clock. Being able to play it on end of turn if nothing else is happening is solid too. And our last fairy is Sentinels of Glen Elendra. It's a 3 and a blue for a flash flying 2/3. It's a fairy, and it's a good solid beater. 4-drop is a bit expensive, so we're only going to run 2 of these, and we're hoping that we can win the game with it at some point, eventually. Our last creature is going to be Augur of Bolas, 1/3, 1 and a blue, and when it enters the battlefield, look at the top 3 cards of your library and may reveal an instant or a sorcery from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. With 26 instants, this is quite often going to be drawing us an extra card, so it's just going to be a solid ground creature, has some synergy with Repulse, and I am playing this in the slot of the Spire Golem of the original list. While our Spire Golem does help us win the game, and it does help block some of the current flyers in the format, I felt like Augur of Bolas would give us a bit more card advantage, and we'd be able to play it a little bit earlier. It's good against ground creatures, all that stuff. So we're going to be trying that out. Feel free to switch it back if that is what you prefer. Our land base is going to be pretty simple. 14 islands, gotta cast some blue spells. 3 Lonely Sandbar, comes into play tapped, which does suck, but it allows us to cycle it in the late game, so definitely want to play some of those. 4 Quicksand, it taps for 1 colorless normally, but you can sacrifice it to give target attacking creature without flying -1/-2 until end of turn. This is the best removal spell in blue, so we're definitely playing a full 4 of those. And 1 Radiant Fountain, which taps for a colorless, and when it enters the battlefield, gain 2 life. Very useful to do that against burn, so definitely want one of those in this current meta. Jumping on over to the sideboard, we're going to start with 2 Annul, which is 1 blue, counter target artifact or enchantment spell. There's a lot of hexproof going around, and this is a great answer to some of the stuff they're doing. 1 Curfew, which is 1 blue. Each player returns a creature they control to their owner's hand. That is great if we can return one of our Spellstutter Sprites or Augurs of Bolas, and amazing if we manage to return one of our opponent's hexproof creatures with stuff on it, or a Gurmag Angler, or anything like that. Just a solid card for 1 mana. 3 Dispel, which is 1 blue, counter target instant spell. A lot of instants floating around. Definitely need some answers to those in those matchups. 4 Hydroblast, 1 blue for choose 1, either destroy target red permanent or counter target red spell. It's going to be extremely useful. We obviously want 4 of those. There's a reason why most decks play it, so we're going to do that as well. 1 Boomerang, 2 blue for return target permanent to its owner's hand. This can return absolutely anything from the Karoo lands to an enchantment to any creature, anything. So it's just kind of like our catch-all in blue. I do have some considerations of possibly running Echoing Truth in that spot, but for now we're going to keep it at Boomerang. We're playing 1 Faerie Macabre, 1 and 2 black. It's going to be a Fairy Rogue, 2/2, flying. None of that actually matters though, because we only want it for the discard Faerie Macabre, exile up to 2 target cards from graveyards. We don't have any way of casting this in our deck, so everything else on the text on the card doesn't matter. The discard effect is exactly what we want. It allows us to exile problematic recursion effects that our opponents are doing, especially against Tron, so that's where that will come in. And then we've got 3 Gutshot. It is 1 Phyrexian red mana, and it does 1 damage to any target. We're never going to be paying red mana for this. It's always going to be paying 2 life, but we need this against Elves, Tribe, and decks like that. Just anything where 1 damage will remove some of their stuff. That is the entire deck. I hope you've enjoyed it. We're going to be running it through a full league here, so come and see how it performs. And then, of course, at the end, we'll go through a wrap-up to see where some of the deck's weaknesses was, where some of its strengths were, and possible changes. So, I hope you enjoy.